Hello, I'm Steve Hasselberg, Lab Manager of the Campbell University School of Engineering. Today we're going to be discussing the Epilog laser cutter and engraver. With it, you can engrave a wide variety of materials, including wood, plastic, leather. You can also cut the above materials, but you should not be cutting metal. Some terminology is important to understand before we go any further. The difference between raster engraving and vector cutting. For engraving, I use a raster technique similar to a inkjet printer, which goes back and forth horizontally, leaving dots on your paper. With the laser, you are going back and forth and you are burning away material in a certain pattern. But when you need to cut out of a larger stock of material, then you need to cut all the way through it, and that is vector cutting. In today's demonstration, we will be discussing raster engraving. In a future video, we will be discussing vector cutting. Today we're going to be engraving the Campbell University Kivet logo on some Romark plastic. The Romark plastic has two sides, and when you engrave, you take away the top layer so that you can see the colors below. Now I'm going to use PowerPoint to set up my job for printing. I've already opened a blank presentation. One of the first things I like to do is to clear the screen or slide of anything that might be on it. I do need to set the page size to be the size of what I'm engraving. I go to the Design tab. On the far right, I could set the slide size. I'm going to select Custom. For this job, the width and the height are both 3 inches. You can select either option here, as it only matters when there's already text on the slide. Now I need to insert my image. I've already downloaded the image that I want to get, and it is in my Downloads folder. I'm going to copy and paste it into my slide, where I can size it and position it wherever I want. Now that the job is set up, I'm ready to send it to the engraver. I do this through the Print dialog. Select the appropriate printer, the Epilog engraver, and all the settings are in the printer properties. Center engraving is very common, where you would position the cursor to be in the center of the object that you are engraving. In this case, I am not doing center engraving. I'm going to position the cursor in the upper left-hand corner. This gives very good, precise control over where each object will be printed. 600 dpi resolution is common, although some people prefer higher or lower resolution depending on their desired effect. It is essential to select the appropriate laser for your job. Fiber is mostly used for metals, CO2 for everything else. There are exceptions, however. Consult the quick use guides or the manual to select the appropriate laser for your job. If you are only engraving, you would select a raster job type. For cutting, you would select vector. Some jobs are a mixture of cutting and engraving. Our job today is only engraving, so we will select raster. The piece size must be appropriate for your job and agree with what you have put on the engraver. Work by using a 3x3 piece of plastic. The raster settings are in the upper right-hand corner. We're going to select a speed of 90 and a power of 25. This was determined by consulting with the quick use guide. Top-down engraving is most common. Image dithering has to do with the dot pattern for the engraving. Standard, the default, has a very regular dot pattern, which has an artistic appeal, but some people prefer using Jarvis or Stuckey and getting a smoother pattern. Now that all the settings are made, I click OK. Before I send my job to the printer, however, I do want to select a pure black and white. Colors and even grayscale do not turn out well, and how to print them will be discussed in a future presentation. I'm going to send my job to the engraver by selecting Print, and we'll see how the job turns out. Now that we have sent our project to the laser engraver, before we go any further, we do need to say a few words about safety. First, safety glasses are required. With a machine like the laser engraver, you might think it's not dangerous and I don't need to worry about it. However, if you're in our lab, you never know what else could be going on. Safety glasses are still required. Second, before you turn a machine on, it's important to know how to turn it off in case of an emergency. There is a stop button on the console that will stop the job in progress. There is also an emergency stop that will cut all power to the machine. Finally, each machine has its own particular concerns. With the laser engraver, there is a risk of fire as materials can overheat. If you do get a flare-up, you can stop the machine to turn the laser off. You can hit the emergency stop or just open the door. You can use a mister if there is a small flare-up. With a larger fire, however, you do not want to use the fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. You want to use the Halotron fire extinguisher by the machine, as this will not harm it. I'm going to take my work and put it in the upper left-hand corner. You can place it anywhere on the tray, but that is the most common. The first thing I need to do is to focus the machine. I need to select one of the two laser guides. Since I'm using the CO2 laser, I'm going to take that one and put it on the two hooks. When you're focusing, what you're really doing is you are adjusting the table to be the appropriate distance away from the laser. I'm going to get it close, and then I'm going to slow the table down so I can control its positioning a little bit better. If you're unclear when you're about to make contact, a little helpful technique is to set the laser guide wiggling back and forth, and then when it stops wiggling, you know that you have made contact. When you have it set to the right amount, you want to set the zero on the focus by depressing the joystick on the control panel. Now I need to set my XY coordinates. It's helpful at that point to turn on the red laser. This is only for sighting, it is not for engraving and cutting. If I were doing center engraving, then I would position the cursor to where I want the center of my project to be. In this case, I'm not doing center engraving, so I want to put the cursor to the upper left-hand corner. I'm going to press the plunger, and that sets 0, 0, or my origin value. At this point, we're ready to start cutting. Now that we've set the focus and coordinates, before we press go, we do need to turn on the filter and air compressor, which are behind the laser engraver. Compressor and filter. It will get loud. Now we are ready to press go. I've turned off the filter, and now I'm going to retrieve my part. Sometimes you have to dust it off because of ashes or melted plastic. And here's the finished Kibit logo. In this demonstration, we've discussed raster engraving. In future demonstrations, we will do vector cutting and some advanced techniques such as preparing a photograph for engraving and outlining images for cutting. Go make something awesome.